Welcome to the Toni Copper Cast. Experience stories, life lessons, and teaching moments. Join us as we inspire you to be your authentic self. Welcome once again to the Toni Copper Cast. Thank you so much for joining us today on our Lessons Learned in Leadership. I had the privilege of having a meeting yesterday with a media mogul individual and another individual that's starting an organization. And we were talking about leadership and how it has changed pre-COVID, during COVID, and post-COVID. So yeah, I thought we were done with the COVID conversation, but I just want to talk about the trends that I'm seeing, what I'm noticing, and leadership today. And maybe some of those tips will help you in your leadership. So let's talk about some of the things, because I've had the amazing privilege of working with certain organizations. I was working with them in 2019 and 2020, and then we had a pandemic, and I continued working with those leaders, and still to this day. And it's been an interesting shift of watching how leadership changes, because in reality, most companies, not all, but most companies, they had a ton of face-to-face interaction. So if I needed something from you, I could just walk down the hallway, go to your cubicle or your office or wherever it is, ask you for what I needed, and walk back to my desk. And the beauty of doing that is we could have had a conversation, I could have found out a little bit about you, and built a relationship and made sure everything was okay. Then we had this shift where suddenly every single person's virtual. And some companies shifted really well, and other companies didn't have the means, so it was quite a transition. In the virtual world, what ended up happening is some leaders became those micromanagers. So these really, really good leaders that were phenomenal when everybody was face-to-face, even school teachers. They were phenomenal when they were face-to-face, and then suddenly they're in a virtual setting and they forgot how to lead, they forgot how to communicate, and suddenly they're micromanaging. And one particular leader I worked with, she was an amazing leader when they were all together. And then suddenly she's asking them, I need you to turn this in. And every hour she's checking in on all her employees. I don't know if you know what that feels like, but imagine every single hour somebody going, do you have this? Hey, how's this going? Do you have this? It gets really, really frustrating, let's put it that way. So in the beginning I had to tell her, let's just ease off. Let's start with only checking in once a day. She goes, well, what if they're not doing their job? Guess what? You'll know. So did you walk to their desk every hour when they were at a desk? She goes, no. I said, no, you trusted that they got their job done. We have to do the same thing. So then she started checking up on every day, but then she made them at the end of every day write a report of every single thing they did. So this amazing leader suddenly became a micromanager. And what was interesting is she wasn't alone. There was tons and tons of leaders that did exactly the same thing. They suddenly wanted to check up, make sure they're doing their job, and where they trusted them before. So it was an interesting shift in leadership I saw, but then you had the other spectrum where they're at home and they never checked up on them. So the employees suddenly never heard from their manager or their boss in any way, shape, or form. So that was interesting. By the way, with that particular manager I was telling you about, she ended up now just doing weekly check-ins. And they do weekly check-ins. It's going well, but it took her a while to get there just to do weekly check-ins. Now we're in a situation where some people are back in the office, some people are still virtual, and some people are in a hybrid situation where they're in the office once in a while and at home once in a while. Many people ask what my opinion is, what do I prefer. I really don't have one per se. I will tell you that if I worked at an organization, I would want the hybrid, because there's nothing better than actually seeing people once in a while, but then being able to work from home once in a while, that happy medium. I know that working from home every single solitary day after a while for me can be very draining and lonely, quite honestly. So now what's happening in leadership? What's going on now? Well, what I'm finding is a lot of leaders are learning or trying to figure out, how do we engage, how do we change? We are in a leadership world now where you need to become creative, you need to think outside the box, and you need to change the way you communicate. And if you don't do those three things, you're going to be left in the dust behind. You're going to be the company that people don't want to work for. They don't want to come to, they don't want to do anything for. So what we want to talk about is how to do that. So there's three things that the leaders have realized and that I've realized with leaders now that these individuals are either in a virtual setting or they're in a hybrid situation. First and foremost, number one, okay, check-ins are extremely important. Extremely important. But the check-ins don't have to be, what are you doing for work and how you doing this? It doesn't have to be a situation where nothing was accomplished. A check-in of, how are things going? What can I do for you? What do you need? Here's what's coming. So think about it like giving them the preview before the movie. That's what we want to focus on. So as leaders, the first part of communication when you're dealing with individuals that are in a virtual setting, how do we engage them? And one of the greatest things to do is to use our organizational communication. And the way we do that is call and check up on them. It can be once a week if you want. It can be every other day. But it's not about work. It's just, how are things going? What can I do for you? You're going to start realizing some employees don't need that and some employees do. And that's a big part of leadership, is adapting for what your employees need. Okay? So that's number one. The second part of engagement is, oh my goodness, we already were inundated with tons and tons of meetings before COVID when everybody was in the office. Now, in this virtual, we're suddenly in meetings after meeting about the meeting when there's a meeting. By the way, there's a meeting. Okay? And most of them become unnecessary. So I asked for permission from this one company to share this story. But this one organization, I have the privilege of being a part of their executive meeting. And they have it every single solitary week. And it lasts about 2 hours. And when the meeting was done, I said, seriously, this was the most unnecessary meeting I've been a part of, because you're just regurgitating information. And I said, so if you're going to dedicate 2 hours to a meeting and everybody's virtual, what is it that we can accomplish and get done to move forward, as opposed to regurgitating information that everybody already knows? Then they said, well, everybody doesn't read their emails. Well, guess what? You are executive leaders. If you choose not to read your email and then you are uninformed, that is on you. That is not on the fact that we have to have a meeting because you don't do what you're supposed to. So as a leader, we have to be aware that it is our responsibility to get the information. But then when you're going to have a meeting, make sure that it is productive, it's forward thinking, but also a check-in. So we changed the meetings. We did this starting in July. And I didn't give them all the suggestions. I actually asked them, what are some things you could do? How could we do it? And so they just changed the second hour of the meeting. The first hour is regurgitating information, which they need because they discuss it. That's fine. The second hour is, what projects are we working on? Where do we need to go with it? Who's responsible? And we're working on the next steps. And everybody's assigning responsibility, having a conversation about it. And then they end the meeting with, have a great day. They some of them tell a dad joke, some of them tell them something funny, but they always say that the CEO says, what is it that I can do for you over this week? And then they all think about it, and then they get to answer. And their answers last about 30 seconds per person. There's only 10 people in the meeting, so you're talking about a 10-minute conversation at the end. The beauty of that is now everybody leaves with action items. The CEO does a check-in, what can he do for them, and everybody kind of finds out. We did this in July for 4 weeks in a row. We did it in August for 4 weeks. And then in September, the CEO forgot how we run meetings, and ended up skipping that whole entire agenda, went back, and what was interesting, I'm kind of glad he did, because it gave us a little experiment to see. And it was interesting. They felt like it was draining. They didn't get a lot accomplished, and it was a waste of 2 hours. It could have been done in 30 minutes. So I'm going to tell you, one of the biggest things that you need to think about as a leader is, how are you running meetings? It's not the same way you used to do it when everybody was face-to-face and just chit-chatting and that camaraderie was happening. You have to create that in a virtual environment. You have to ask how they're doing. You have to ask, what can I do for you? Then pause and let them answer. You have to call them out directly to get their opinions, because you're going to have employees that in a virtual setting, they don't speak up. They don't feel comfortable. So you have to be aware, as a leader, your organizational communication is extremely important. Extremely important. More so now than it was before. Don't get me wrong. Communication was important way a long time ago. But today, when you have a hybrid situation or a virtual situation in your company, you've got to find ways to engage and make it productive. Now, there's a lot of companies, they use Slack and Instatext and those things to get information, and that's wonderful. I'm not against those. I actually think it's great. You get the information really quick. But I also want to say you need to do check-ins. It's really important. Not check-ins to find out, are you doing this job or this job where you're micromanaging. Check in on how are you doing. I'll give you another example. So this morning I had the privilege of coaching a particular leader, and we'll call her Tara. Okay, and Tara is in a new leadership role within the organization. She just literally took this role August 30th, and she took it on. And so what happens is there's a senior leader, and now she's under it, and she has a team of 5. And when I got on the phone with Tara, my first question was, well, congratulations in this leadership role. How are you doing? And the first thing she said, I'm doing all right. I'm making a lot of mistakes. I'm learning some things. I go, all right, well, how is we'll call her Sam, how is Sam leading you? She goes, I haven't heard from Sam. So she's in a brand new leadership role. And her boss, her leader, has yet to call her, contact her to find out how it's going, what does she need. And it's funny, but you think, man, why didn't she think of it? When we were face-to-face all the time, it was easy. You could see them, you could look at them, you knew what was going on, you could check on them. You have to make a point now to do check-ins. Put it in your calendar. I have it in my calendar. I check in with my team every single solitary week. Sometimes it's a text message, sometimes it's a virtual meeting. It really just depends what's needed. So that's the number one lesson learned in leadership through this pandemic and moving into a virtual. If you don't start doing those things, checking in, how can I help you? What do you need from me? Those questions, you really are going to be left in the dust as a leader, and people are going to go somewhere else and say, forget, I don't want to work here. Okay. The second big change that a lot of leaders are really unhappy with is the fact that individuals want their own hours. And what I mean by that is, I'm working from home now. Why do I have to wake up at 7 a.m. and check in and work till 5? Can't I work from 6 a.m. to a certain time and then take a 2-hour break to go outside, get refreshed, and then work later in the afternoon? I have an employee that loves to work at night. So literally she works from 7 p.m. to midnight, and then she works during the day her other hours. I understand some companies can't do that. You're in a tech business or a trade business. You have to show up at the house. You've got to do what you need to do. But in an office setting, you might have times where you need to meet. But you've got to allow that flexibility for employees. They're desiring it. They want it, especially when they're home. Or let's pretend they have children and their school got canceled. Now they're at home and having to deal with the children at the same time. Okay? So they may call you and say, hey, I just need to get my kids together over the next 2 hours, but I'll work later on in the day. No big deal. Okay? What is really important? Is it the amount of hours that they work, or is it what they produce? Is it their productivity and what they produce? I'd rather have an employee be able to accomplish something in 30 minutes as opposed to spending 3 hours on the same thing because they're trying to fill in the hours. So this is something, it's a different way of thinking. It's not a way that a lot of leaders consider, but I will tell you, this is something you must consider. That it's not about, did you work your 40 hours, or did you work 42 hours, or did you work your 38 hours? What it is did you get done what needed to be get done? Were you productive? Did you accomplish it? Okay? Are you helping others? Are you leading? Do you have a leadership mindset? Those are the things that we should be asking ourselves of our team, as opposed to making them check in at 7 a.m. and 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. and so on and so forth. So those two things I want to leave you with. This was just kind of tips based on a conversation that I had yesterday with someone regarding where is leadership going. There's a lot more to where it's going. I always believe, though, 2 tips is enough. You soak those in, you digest it, you try it, practice it for a while, then we'll give more tips within our next few podcasts as we go along. So the real lesson here is to truly take the time to understand your team, what their needs are, what they need from you, how they need to be communicated with, and be sure to check in. And a check-in doesn't mean check in on their word. Check in to see what you can do for them. This is how we're going to engage them. This is how we're going to keep them motivated within the company. This is what's important. Adapt your communication to what they need. Now, I have some phenomenal news for you. I had the privilege of co-authoring a book with Mr. Kevin Harrington, who was one of the original sharks on Shark Tank, and with an individual named Jim Britt, who is a phenomenal business leader. And the book comes out next week. You can order it today if you want it. You need to visit www.cpgleadership.com. www.cpgleadership.com. You can visit our website, go on our website, order the book. The book will be to you no later than the end of August. I can promise you it will be there by August, or not August. What month are we in? Whatever. By the end of October. Okay, I don't know what month. I just skipped all of September. But anyway, I can guarantee you that you'll have it by the end of October, by October 30th if you order it today. So visit www.cpgleadership.com. Order your book. It has tons of leadership insights. It has phenomenal information to help guide you. And the beauty is you can read one chapter, put it down, go to another chapter a few weeks later, and it's perfectly okay. Thank you so much for joining us on the Toni Copper Cast. I'll see you again. Thank you for joining us. Tune in next week for more inspirational stories. And always, remember, keep on smiling.